An alligator lizard took up residence in the SCAF building this week. It created amusement in some and ire in others among my colleagues. Now, in the summer, we're used to being greeted by these darting reptiles who often scoot out right when we are opening the door, trying to sneak in with us. This one, however, though, seemed to have lost their sense of season because they are supposed to be buried underground right now, and doing that, looking for the potential for warmth. But since they apparently did not choose to bury underground, they chose to come look for warmth among us. And some of us, as I said, now actually are enjoying it more than others. And we may have it with us curled up in some corner throughout the winter, since many of us seem to lack the summer energy to chase it out. Now, these days of cold and dark are times when we are biologically wired to need more rest. Something in us would like to hibernate all by itself, even without the ever-present polycrises which our world offers up each morning with our first beverages and meals. In her book, Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times, Catherine May looks at a phenomenon she has named wintering, which is not only that natural, biological slowing down, but it's also an acknowledgement of some of the parts of life that we are conditioned to try to overlook, including those times of sadness and loss, of disappointment, which may chime louder in this time of the year. May writes that everyone winters at one time or another, and some winter over and over again. It is a season for us. It's part of our natural season and cycle. It's a time of being a little fallow, and often that fallow is a period that allows us the energy to amass the ability to spring forth in some new form of life. So it's important. It's usually, she writes, involuntary, lonely, and deeply painful, and yet it is also inevitable. We like to imagine that life should be one eternal summer, and in fact, our culture teaches us that that is how it's supposed to be, and that we are uniquely failing if we don't achieve that for ourselves in every moment, in every day, in every season. That is not the truth, she says. Now, if anyone remembers the book Alice in Wonderland, you might remember there was a creature known as a dormouse. Now, you might have thought, like I did, that it was a fictional kind of character, such as the Mad Hatter. But actually, turns out it's an actual, rather adorable rodent, and I believe one that's suitable to replace kittens as an antidote for despondency. It's very cute. The thing is, though, like the alligator lizard that was supposed to be nesting and resting, the dormouse is actually one of only 3 creatures in the world that actually hibernates in the sense of a true hibernation. And I know that you are going to want to know what the other 2 are, so I'll tell you. They are bats and hedgehogs. But everyone else, like the lizard, is just in a state of deep rest. And Catherine May, who actually held the gelatinous abundance of an early winter dormouse, points to the life cycle of the leaf and what happens in the winter when the leaves fall through a process known as abscission. We have a season where we grow, she says, and a season where some parts of us die back. At the end of every summer, the deciduous trees allow their leaf cells to stop making food, and the trees release colors that have always been there. For the other thing that happens is that the cells that hold the leaf onto the branch begin to die so that the leaf can be let go. Yet the colors are already there. And when we look at a branch in the winter, we think that we're seeing a denuded branch, but what we're actually seeing, those little nubs, are actually the beginning of the buds for the leaves for the next year. The tree is already ready and preparing. We don't see them because we don't expect to see them. We think of them as something that's gone, but actually they are the material for the next season of growth. Now, cold mornings, like we had several mornings last week, I have to bribe my dogs to go out in the morning, to do what needs to be done every morning, as we discussed. They do not like the cold and the damp. In the summer, they're glad to leap out and go out, but in the winter, they are just not really excited about it. Roger Ickert, who wrote A History of Nighttime, and says that all of creatures have altered habits in this time of the year. They're just part of how we are wired biologically. For example, I found this incredibly reassuring. Waking in the middle of the longer winter nights is actually something that was just a regular practice before we had electricity. And when we had 14-hour nights without any electricity, there was the first rest and the second sleep. And in between, people would get up and do what they needed to do, pray, reflect, make love, indulge in quiet conversation with family. So what you may be fearing as an onset of insomnia may just be circadian rhythms coming back. So you cannot worry about that either in the middle of the night. The reality is, though, that we need times of down and rest and slumber and renewal and retreat. And yet, as Casey said in her call to worship, we are rewarded more for working, for producing, for engaging, and being incredibly busy all the time. And for this reason, we're seeing among younger activists a real call to recognize that rest is a part of activism, it is a part of all of our engagement in life, and that it is actually very needed. Tricia Hersey has approached the need for rest in another way as the need to counter the excesses of capitalism, which are so apparent in this particular season, noting that we are often afraid that our basic needs won't be met unless we work like machines. She further emphasizes that, quote, this rigid binary of work and rest combined with the violent reality of poverty for so many of us keeps us in a place of sleep deprivation and a constant hustling to survive. Because of this cycle, she started a movement which she calls the napping ministry, to choose rest as an extreme form of resistance and an act of faith, the napping ministry. And I think it's interesting that one of our lights just went out. I think that's very appropriate. During the service, thank you, light. I've never liked that. Anyway, we won't go there. But the napping ministry, isn't that a great idea, right? An actual acknowledgement that we need to have that rest to continue to do the work we want to do. And Hersey talks about this especially for those of her kin, Black activists. She actually stages group Black power naps as a space for self-care. And she believes that naps are a portal to imagination when we can rest in community, and that actually we may be just as productive through our dream life as we are in our work life as well, resting in community and pushing back against the norms of productivity that don't benefit but a very narrow slice of those in society. Now, Catherine May points out, in a similar vein, that the overwhelm of the lives we lead are caused in part by an increasingly consumptive world, which included the privatization of the nuclear family, which only happened a few generations ago, where every single family has to live in its own dwelling, which means it has to produce more and more and more to be able to afford this. She says we are all stuck in our small separate family units, and the issue that comes from that is that the little unit requires a lot of money to fuel it, and that means that there are often just two people responsible for all that money coming into a house. But it also means we lack basic other kinds of support so often. I don't have the support I need, she says, and this is like so many people, I think. Any kind of convenient family I can call on day to day. And more than that, incredibly, we used to live in units where our lives were intermeshed, where we could help one another out. And now, we think it's a virtue to all be so separate. We think that this privacy we have is worth it, but I actually don't think it is. I think it's part of our profound sense of exhaustion, actually. And of course we know that in the world we live in, we are grateful that people can choose many forms of family as well as those that they were born into. But I think the point she's making is this, that we are rewarded for being completely independently able to care for all of our needs, and that in this season we may feel that more than we do in others. That's why it's a good time in our year that we share our Christmas with Hope Solutions, and that we will also be putting together our Cantry, and Travis will be leading us in an effort to put together bags for distribution to people enduring these days and nights unhoused on the streets as we approach this holiday season. Here's the thing. Adjusting our expectations to this time of year could make a difference. If we weren't putting too much of our limited energy into resisting these feelings that maybe we don't think we're allowed to have, we might actually just be able to rest and retreat. The sort of rethinking and resorting from this dormant time of the year is something we need. May reminds us that the needle breaks the fabric in order to repair it. And she says we are in the habit of thinking that our life is as linear as a long march from birth to death in which we have one victory after another. And yet that is not how most people's lives work. She writes, I think it's true. We're uncomfortable with sadness, and our instinct when someone tells us they're sad is to solve it for them or find a message that's going to inspire them away from sadness. And that can feel a lot like being pushed away, like being told our feelings aren't acceptable, and that our state of being isn't accessible. When we're in this position, it's more than a feeling. It's a whole state of being. We need to have space for sadness, to acknowledge and validate it, to encourage us. To counter the balance of this time of year, it has been a long tradition for us to invent festivals that allow us to have something to look forward to joyfully in this time of darkness. And in the Druidic tradition, that means a festival every 6 weeks, so you always have something that's coming up and a way to be with others. Because we need to rest and we also need to connect with others. So that is an important piece that we need to remember as well. Last Sunday night, I was awakened by the sound of a pack of coyotes. They were on the canal trail behind my house, and they were yipping like pups and then howling in alternating waves of sound. And I only heard them because I had fallen asleep on the couch, where it's easier to hear those things in my house. In my bedroom, their noises probably would have just been incorporated into my dreams somehow. Yet I was enjoying the seasonal luxury of curling up under a blanket with my 2 warm companion dogs. I'm one of the ones where they sleep with me. And so I was still on the couch at 2 a.m. And after Crystal and Ferdy did their dog duty howling back at our visitors, we all curled up and went back to sleep. So today, as we gather, let us affirm that we can have many emotions at this time of the year. Sadness is as true as cheer, and our range of the fullness of those emotions does not mean that something is wrong with our life. It more likely means that something is right, that we are in a time of fallow awaiting something to happen. Let us take our lessons from the trees, from the dormice. Let us remember not only to rest, but also to connect. And I want to mention especially that our grief group was postponed to this Friday coming up, if that's a useful space for you. Just as it's natural to snuggle on the couch, it is also good for our spirits to take a walk in the brisk air. We can rejoice, we can celebrate, we can grieve, we can mourn, and we can also prepare for the turnings in our lives. This is a time for all of those. Resting, as Catherine May says, is a radical act and an essential one.